Where's Johnny?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
It's so simple.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Chasing the Gold. This is my final Oscar predictions extravaganza, and in my search for a guest, I wanted to bring on somebody who I've been a fan of their work for so long, and I just, on social media, writing, whatever, and that is Amanda Spears. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on Chasing the Gold.
Thank you. This is like the best intro ever.
Well, I wanted to ask, so one of the main reasons why I love doing this podcast and I love bringing on guests is to sort of learn a little bit more about them beyond sort of what we all see on film Twitter. So I would just love to know, like, how did you become sort of an Oscar nerd? How did you get into, like, this space? And what are your thoughts on this season and all of that? Dig into your brain a little bit for me here.
Well, I became a fan very young. It was always like a special night. We got to stay up and watch, like, you know, I was a 90s kid, so we got to see the big, you know, Alan Menken production numbers with W. Allen doing all the choreography, and that was always fun to see those. And then you start paying attention and you start noticing trends, and then you start paying attention to those trends, and then you start writing about those trends, and people sometimes listen to you. So that's basically it. But this year has been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was very boring with maybe one surprise. This year has been a little bit more scattered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. This is my first year as the awards editor at In Session Film, and I feel bad because I'm like, ordinarily, I really do know what I'm talking about, but this year is so crazy that I have no confidence whatsoever. But Amanda, you're being quite humble here because I don't know if people know you kind of single-handedly changed the course of Oscar history. Tell people about that, and I feel like people need to know this. So brag on, my friend.
Okay, well, I started a hashtag the first time they tried to, you know, take away a few categories back when there was 24 called hashtag present all 24. That became hashtag present all 23 a couple of years ago, even though it didn't work the second time. But that kind of was my big moment where I was like trending on Twitter. So it was a little weird to go from no one to like everywhere. And you're like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on. But it was kind of interesting that it caught on so much.
Mm-hmm.
And for a shy person, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. But I think that
for an
speaks
introvert,
to like,
you're like,
the,
oh God.
the broader, like, people want to see the full scope of the artistry represented, and it's not just about the superstars. And so I felt like that was such an interesting moment in sort of our Oscar space. I don't know how much, you know, now I feel like things have shifted so much and we can get into it, but there's something like very wholesome about that whole campaign of like seeing it embraced. And part of me just feels like with this season that has been so toxic and just ruled by drama, ruled by like fandom, and sort of the Oscars becoming increasingly like pay to play, it seems like. I'm like, I kind of wish we could go back to the days of like the hashtag taking over the internet and wholesome tweets from Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, I miss Guillermo del Toro's tweets. I don't see him as much as I used to, it seems like. But yeah, it can be a positive space when it's used right. So
that is so true. So Amanda, shall we dive into our Oscar predictions?
Absolutely. Let's get started.
I'm hoping that you and I disagree more often so that you can give me your sort of thought process and maybe sway me to the correct choices. I figured we'd start with the shorts, which as I've said on multiple podcasts, are pretty like solid this year. I feel like we got a good crop of 15 shorts across the nominees. Amanda, being that you're my guest, I'll allow you to start. What is your pick for best documentary short subject?
Oh, documentary short. Let's see here. For some reason, I had live action short up. 1 second.
I'm very
The shorts
like
are always what really screw my predictions, if I'm being honest, because I
right.
usually was like,
Yeah.
I got 22 out of 23 one year, and the one I missed was animated short. So I'm like, I hate you. I'm going with The Incident for
You are.
documentary short. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're already off to a good start here because I also have Incident in my number one, but I'm very tempted to switch to I Am Ready Warden. So tell me why I should stick to my guns and stick with Incident.
It seems to have the momentum right now. It's hard because I haven't seen a lot of these as I usually do, but it's about the police, which, in this year seems very important. So I do think it has that kind of critical appeal that it needs. I know that I Am Ready Warden also does, but I just think there's something about it taking place in Chicago that it seems like the one to look at. It seems like it's got the buzz around it to finally to take this.
Well, that's not helpful because I agree with everything that you said, and like I said, I was hoping you'd sway me a different direction. But I agree. I've said this before. I think it's like kind of inventive in its storytelling. It does everything that you want a documentary short to do. It leaves you with a gut punch. I think it's, and we'll get to this. Quality does not always matter with the Oscars, obviously, but I think with this particular short, it would be like the rightful winner in this category. So yeah, maybe okay. Now you've given. I guess I'm gonna stick with Incident for now.
Just
Not I've
we
not been.
agree doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah, well, it doesn't mean it means that we're probably both gonna go down the wrong rabbit hole.
Oh,
Okay, so for animated short, I feel confident-ish that it's going to be Wander to Wonder. How are you feeling about that category?
ooh, animated short. I don't usually watch the animated films. They're not my usual favorite. Because there's just so many films to see. Sometimes it can be really difficult to see everything. But I think that this one is probably going to go to Magic Candies,
Mm.
but I would look out for Yuck! Exclamation point, because sometimes, the name matters. And every now and
Yeah,
then the one with the best name wins, and you're like, how did that
right,
happen?
right. And this is such an interesting category because I think Wander to Wonder, it did well at the Annies. It won the BAFTA for Best British Short Film. And the animation style, I've said this again and again, is so interesting. And so I feel like it stands out. But to your point, like Yuck is such an interesting title. It's done in a really interesting way. And then I mean, Beautiful Men too, I think is a threat here just because the animation style is like very adult. There's some full frontal nudity, and it's about sort of men learning to be vulnerable, which is interesting. I mean, In the Shadow of the Cypress is a really beautiful. I mean, you could make an argument literally for all five of these. I just feel like Wander to Wonder has been around for a really long time and in the public consciousness, but I don't know. I honestly, all three of these short categories, I was hoping I'd feel good about at least one of them, and I don't.
Last year
What do
I
you
felt
have?
great about live action short, at least. I'm like, at least we all knew what that was going to be. Like,
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that brings us to live action short. Amanda, what is your pick for live action short?
A Lion. Again, it
Okay,
feels socially relevant. It's about immigration. I think they're going to want to make a stand. in some quiet way. We haven't seen a lot of political speeches, but I think every now and then in these like shorts and the documentary, they'll drop it in there, and this is an easy place to do so. Plus, there's not one directed by somebody who's like got a huge name this season.
Yeah.
It seems like so.
I'm probably am gonna switch to Alien, and if I'm wrong, I'm okay with being wrong. I've said again and again, it's my favorite short of the year. It had such a massive impact on me. And I know, again, that doesn't always matter because my favorite movie of the year was Sing Sing, and that was a mess, Oscar-wise. But I just think that film has such an impact. It stays with you. And to your point, like, it is such a relevant statement of a project. So I think I am just going to switch to that and stick with it. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to go down with the ship. I have Anuja in my number one right now, just because I feel like it's on Netflix. It has, the backing of a lot of big names. It's easily accessible. So that was kind of my thinking. But over and over again, I just keep seeing people are predicting Alien because of how resonant it is. And that has to mean something. And we'll talk about it as we move along the categories. But this might be just one where I switch and go with my heart and take the L, if I'm wrong. But
yeah, it's always, this is where you want to take a calculated risk. I'll just say that as a person who really knows the stats. If you're going to take a risk, do it in either these three categories or in like a tech category. Don't do something crazy in like supporting actor. That's not the place to take a crazy risk, especially this year. But definitely, yeah, be careful.
Okay, Amanda, next up we have Best Sound, which I was feeling pretty confident about my pick here, but I'm starting to have some doubts, and I'm curious what you think for Best Sound.
Oh, let's see here. Best Sound. I again, if you're not nominated for Best Picture, don't predict that one. And luckily this time, that would only eliminate Wild Robot. But I think, again, if you're in question about what to do in some of these tech categories, the best way to make your predictions is to go with the most of anything, the most sound, the most costumes, the most makeup, the most. So in that case, I think this is one where Dune Part 2 will take place. There's 3 musicals in the mix, and I think they're just going to kind of cancel each other out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had the same exact thinking. I said there's 3 sort of musical adjacent films that are going to cancel each other out. And Dune Part 2, I think, is going to have the same sort of Lord of the Rings Two Towers treatment of the VFX and sound. It won sound at BAFTA, so that's an interesting. And I'm going to stick with Dune, but more and more I'm thinking about the possibility of A Complete Unknown surprising here, because it did do well, I think, with one of the sound guilds. And I don't know, I think it's a possibility, but I think I'm still going to stick with Dune. But I feel like it's solidly in second place, I would say.
Yeah, if there was a sound editing and sound mixing, a film like A Complete Unknown or Wicked would have a really good chance of picking up mixing. But because they've combined this into one category, just with the exception of last year where they went with something that was all about the sound, the zone of interest, you want to go with the loudest film. And that, unfortunately, is Dune Part 2.
Okay, so we found one where we're in agreement. Good. Let's go to Best Makeup and Hairstyling. I think we'll also be in agreement on this one. I have The Substance. I've had it in pretty much all season long. Would you agree?
Yeah, but you have to remember, it's not just best makeup, it's best makeup and hairstyling. Now, this is one of 3 categories where usually being a Best Picture nominee would not give you a boost. But this year, I would either pick Substance or Wicked. Wicked has done a really good job of positioning themselves as the hairstyling kind of film, where they've really done a lot of in-depth videos about making of the wigs that that Cynthia Erivo wears, and just making sure that people know how they went about making her green so it seemed more 3D and wasn't as flat. So they've done a lot, but yeah, the most makeup would go to the substance. And frankly, Demi Moore, we'll get to her in a few minutes, she needs the substance to pick up another award. Yes, the film is nominated for Best Picture, which helps her, but she needs that 1-2 combination that we've seen with like Brendan Fraser or Meryl Streep or even Jessica Chastain. Yes, I know none of those films were nominated for Best Picture, but it does help her if the Academy supports the film enough to award it in another place other than potentially Best Actress.
And to your point, I think the Substance team has also done a pretty good job of saying, hey, we were an indie film. We put this film together with literally our blood, sweat, and tears. And it really does make you appreciate the scope of the makeup and the prosthetics and all of that. So I think, people in the industry are going to appreciate that and want to see it awarded. But definitely, I think Wicked, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think, I feel cautiously optimistic that the Substance is going to take this one home.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that it's not a done deal. I mean, I know they won BAFTA, but that's never, you just never know what the split's going to be or how close it was.
Very true. And to your point, at the guilds, I feel like Wicked picked up all the hairstyling awards and the Substance picked up all the makeup awards. So not necessarily hopeful. Amanda, now we come to 2 categories, which I feel like we are probably confident about, which is costumes and production design. I have Wicked taking both of those. Would you agree?
Yes, and I always say if when in doubt, it's best to pick the same film for those categories because mathematically speaking, if you win one, your chances of winning the other almost double. And Wicked fits the bill of that 1-2 punch of winning both of these. So and I think they did a great job. They also have the most of everything. So
Yeah.
usually you don't need you usually don't need a Best Picture nomination to win costumes, but I think this year stick with the Best Picture nominees, which is, and the rest of the nominees in some of these categories are very male oriented, especially in costumes, which is not going to help them. They prefer the dresses and the glitter and everything, and they really give you all of that in Wicked.
And, Nathan Crowley, the production designer, is sort of a long overdue veteran of the industry. To see him finally get a win here, I think a lot of people want to see that, so that's a factor as well. I do just want to bring up, and I'm pretty locked in on Wicked for both of these, but I would have loved to see The Brutalist be more of a factor in production design, given that so much of the film hinges on architecture. And I was earlier in the season, like I just felt like that made sense for The Brutalist, but The Brutalist has faded, which we will get to, but it's a shame that never really came through for them.
It's not as flashy. I mean, I think I would almost even think Conclave would have a better chance at production design only because they do a really great job of recreating the Vatican and the Sistine Chapel and really making you feel the claustrophobia of being locked in that room. If you've ever been there, you're like, my goodness, I can't imagine. First of all, there was like tons of people when I went there, so I can't imagine being there with like that few people, but still I could imagine you that feeling of claustrophobia after being locked in.
Okay, Amanda, now we come to a rather contentious category potentially, which is Best Original Song. Who do you have winning Best Original Song?
This is Netflix's worst category. They have had so much trouble trying to win this category. Like, they had a Mary J. Blige song, and instead of saying, hey, you're not going to vote for her for Best Supporting Actress, let me give her Best Song. That would have worked, by the way. Then they had 3 nominees last time. Ironically, Diane Warren was in the mix for that also. Won the Golden Globe. That was the first time she ever went to the Oscars with a precursor award. Then they had a song from the Trial of the Chicago 7, and they had the song from Eurovision, and they were trying to push the song from Eurovision, which was the wrong one to pick. Now they have 2 songs from Emilia Perez, El Mal, and Mi Camino.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with El Mal, but part of me wonders if they do split, is this what finally leads to Diane Warren finally winning for the 6 AAA for the Journey?
Yeah, I so I have Elmall, and I probably am just gonna stick with it, but I'm not confident at all, just because of the Amelia Perez of it all. I don't know how much that's going to affect it. We'll get to the other categories, but I don't know. I really don't know. And but then just the idea of they've never awarded Diane Warren. Why now? It just doesn't make sense. There's no momentum behind, other than the fact, interestingly, Amanda, I don't know if you noticed at the SAG Awards, they had The Journey playing during the in memoriam section. And I was like, is that a sign of like, and I think it was the
Well, she had a
the
documentary
lyricist.
earlier in the year, so there is
Mm-hmm.
some attention towards her. But awards wise, she does not have the amount of trophies she should have. Like
She
she
does
doesn't even have
not.
the amount of Grammys that someone of her caliber
Yeah.
should. And at least the song is better than last year's. So
I not, people have all kinds of opinions about the anonymous ballots, but I saw one that just said, I'm gonna keep voting for Diane Warren until she wins, and they're like, I didn't even like the song, but I'm just gonna keep voting for her anyway. But
I
I,
think
and
she'll
then,
be one of those that finally wins, and then we'll never hear from her again unless she writes like the greatest song of her career.
do you
But
think that you know the Amelia Perez? I mean, do you think it's gonna maybe not like? Do you think that that's gonna be a factor here?
no, because we haven't seen anyone else punished for this, and we would have
Mm,
seen something. We would have seen it at the BAFTAs. We would have seen it at SAG. We would have
yeah.
seen some signs of it. I don't think they're going to punish the people involved with Amelia Perez because of what one person said. Um, I, I think the problem is that I don't think Netflix knows how to campaign in this category.
Yeah. Well,
The funny thing is that before the nominations came out for this, I was telling people, I'm like, it peaked too early. It had too many it won too many Golden Globes. It got too many Oscar nominations. It's peaked way too soon. And I'm like, and you have to remember, last time Netflix thought they had the Best Picture winner for Roma, they became the headline for running the craziest, most expensive campaign ever, and they screwed it up. So I was thinking like something was going to happen to Netflix, that Netflix was going to do something. At least they can say this wasn't their fault when they lose Best Picture this.
well, and if they also had the like Will and Harper Go West song, which like would have been an easy song for them to get in there just because of love of Kristen Wiig, but like even that they would, yeah, you're totally right that in this category in particular Netflix is struggling with. But I mean, is
And they
Six
shouldn't
Triple
be
Eight was
struggling in
also
this category. They shouldn't be struggling in this category. They
mm,
should have a win in this category. It sums up their entire awards problem, not just at the Oscars, but at the Emmys too, that they cannot produce winners as because they hate that Apple TV won that Oscar before they did for Best
yeah.
Picture.
Which put a pin in that. That's an interesting thing that I would like to come back to. So I guess I was hoping you talked me out of El Mal, but I'm gonna stick with it just because I feel like the film. I mean, 13 nominations cannot be discounted. I don't think that love just evaporates overnight. And so I feel like yeah, song makes more sense, more so than The Journey. My apologies to the great Diane Warren.
I would love to be wrong. I'd love to see her win. I think she'd give a great speech. I think she'd get a lovely standing ovation. It would be a good
Yeah,
moment for her.
Warren winning would be a moment. Yeah, it would definitely be a moment. It would be a moment I would love to see. I just don't feel strong enough to predict it. So next up we have Best Original Score. I have Daniel Blumberg for The Brutalist. Do you have another pick, perhaps?
No, it's been winning everywhere. It's going to win again. The Brutalist that's an easy pickup for the Brutalist, I think, at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
What about best visual effects, Amanda? Do you have any? Who do you have? Any thoughts on that category?
Well, I would go with one of the Best Picture nominees. Only once has this category broken from Best Picture when they've had a nominee in the mix, a film in the nominees. So I would go with Dune Part Two. I would prefer Wicked because I think having her fly around while she's trying to sing, clearly that's not realistic. Not to mention the monkeys changing into flying monkeys. I think that was a little bit more impressive. But they'll probably go with Dune Part Two. And that'll take care of awarding Dune.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like it just makes sense for Dune to sort of pair sound and VFX, and then we'll see what happens with Dune Messiah if it's gonna have a sort of Return of the King moment, or if it's just gonna be like we want to be done with this so we can move on completely. We shall see. Okay, next up we have Best Cinematography. This is an interesting category because I think it's pretty safe, but we should mention Ed Lockman won the Ace. Is it the Ace Eddie for cinematography? Whatever the cinematography guild is, I'm blanking on them.
It's Ace.
But Ace, there we go. I don't know, for some reason I was like, is that editing? But so Ed Lockman
Now you got me confused. I'm like,
won there, and he, is a much beloved cinematographer. This is his last film, most likely. So do you think that there's any world where he somehow surprises here as like a career win for a much beloved, iconic cinematographer giving a last hurrah?
No. Not a Best Picture nominee. It's only broken once, and of course, we all remember who that was for Blade Runner 2049, and they really campaigned for him to win that Oscar. I think that this is again where we're going to see The Brutalist. It won BAFTA. This is a simple pickup for The Brutalist right here. I mean, I would love to be wrong, but that's why I always say take emotion out of it. You got to think strategically with these, and it's always best to go with a Best Picture nominee in this case.
Yeah.
And you have three to choose from, so.
Yeah, there are some categories that we'll get to where I feel like emotion is definitely clouding my judgment. I do think this is a safe pickup for Lowell Crowley for The Brutalist. I wouldn't be completely shocked if Ed Lockman was able to pull through, but I'm not, brave enough to hedge a bet, as you would say. It's not. I'm gonna play it safe there. But next we come to Best Editing, which I think is one of the most fascinating categories, and a category that brings up my central question of how many Oscars is Sean Baker going to win? Because he is nominated here for editing Nora. Amanda, take me through your thought process for the nominees in this category. I think we both ended up in the same place, but I want to know what you think and what brought you to that conclusion.
I'm going with Conclave because I think it builds suspense throughout. And considering that we're talking about people who are literally going from room to room, sitting around and discussing, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. I think in Nora, people have made the argument it lags a little in the middle. I don't see how The Brutalist would win for 3.5 hours worth of screen time. And then the other two, each I think have problems that would prevent them from being the film editing winner. So I'm going with Conclave. It won BAFTA. It has all the momentum going into this. And it looks like this is where we're going to start seeing Conclave make its move towards Best Picture.
Ooh, yeah, I'm going with Conclave as well. I just think with the love that Conclave has, I don't think it's going to be screenplay and nothing else, adapted screenplay and nothing else. And again, to your point, Amanda, I think they do a brilliant job of making something that would seem a little bit more boring not so boring. And I mean, sadly, I think the editing in The Brutalist is actually very good, but I think the runtime, people just can't separate, like, how can a movie so long be well edited, which is a shame. And I think with Sean Baker, like, there are stronger elements of that film to be awarded and I just feel like editing is not going to be one of them. However, given that in recent years we see awards bodies sort of when they like something, they just check it off. It wouldn't surprise me if Sean Baker ends up winning. It would be quite frankly a little bit of a lazy choice. I just wouldn't be surprised by it. But I do think it's
I
going
think
to
it
be
would be a
conflict.
huge upset if they were able to pull off editing. Like that would be the sign something was going to happen that night. But I do think that I think Conclave has been pretty well ahead in editing. That's one that we've seen them repeatedly getting attention for, because it shouldn't seem like it would be interesting. And they don't have a problem with a 3-hour movie, obviously, because Oppenheimer found a way to keep the pacing. But 3.5 hours, it did lag a little in certain spots, and that's understandable for the mass of the story they're trying to tell. But not an editing win.
Next up, we have Best Documentary, which has been, for me, one of the biggest head scratchers of the entire season. Particularly when No Other Land lost at BAFTA to the Superman documentary. I just felt like BAFTA would have been a shoo-in for No Other Land. And so I am predicting it to win, but I am very hesitant and very tempted to switch because coming into the Oscars, it hasn't won anything. It hasn't been nominated a lot of places, and when it has been nominated, it hasn't necessarily won.
And you're going with No Other Land?
Yeah, No Other Land.
I'm going with Porcelain War. I think it's the most relevant. Again, they want to sneak in some political activism. It's about Ukraine and people who stayed behind regardless of what's going on. And I think that we're going to see it sneak off with this. But I like the Superman documentary. I say good for BAFTA for not just having to rubber stamp the Emmys or the Oscars, Go your own way sometimes.
I did like the Superman documentary as well. I was just surprised because whenever I think of Christopher Reeve, I think of him as like an American icon, and I just didn't know that the Brits would have that same sort of connection to him. It's really a shame that the Oscars, the documentary branch, seems to just not like documentaries about famous subjects and kind of punishes those documentaries unfairly at times, I think.
Yeah, I noticed that trend last year when Michael J. Fox had just won his honorary Oscar and they didn't nominate still. I was like, what is wrong with you? But we see these trends, they come and go. So it's what's popular one year will be changed the next. It's unfortunately how these things are.
Yeah. What is your sort of argument for Porcelain War being the sort of the successor to No Other Land, other than the timeliness, which I mean, No Other Land is also timely. I think just not having a distributor has really hurt that film in terms of staying in the public consciousness.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for any of these films because it's like everybody just watches them on Netflix or HBO or whatever you call it now, Max. But yeah, that's going to be hard. That's why I think Porcelain War might be able to edge it out, because I mean they're both of them would be that socially relevant film that could make a speech. But I think because of the Ukraine aspect, we might see Porcelain War, and also it's got a kind of a cool name, so people might think it's about cocaine and just check it off. You just never know. Like people sometimes don't see these; they just pick the names they like, and unfortunately,
Well, if we
happen.
could go back to our shorts, because we were talking about Alien potentially winning for live action. It's interesting that The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent is also sort of a timely documentary. I'm wondering like how much is the timeliness, and then when you look at the documentary short subject, I mean Death by Numbers is about the Parkland shooting. So I'm curious, like when we are dealing with multiple films that have timely subjects, like where are they going to go? I feel like that's going to be very telling just in terms of the mood of the year.
Yeah, and it's an election year, so at least in Best Picture, that does make a difference. We've seen some things happen in election years that we don't normally see any other year.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. which brings me to the most controversial category of the whole year, which is Best International Film. As of right now, I have Emilia Perez. I'm probably going to switch that unless you have an argument as to why I should just stick with Emilia Perez.
I'm sticking with Emilia Perez because it has yet to lose. And I feel like if there was a strong enough backlash, we would have seen it lose at BAFTA. Thank you, Carla, for approving Everyone Can Be a Monster. Really appreciate you, bridging that gap there. But I think that they would have punished the film elsewise. Although also it's got Netflix behind it. They might not be able to get it Best Picture, but they can definitely get it, and they can definitely get it international feature. France wants this. God knows France wants this. And it's a weird year. I was so excited because I kept saying this. I'm like, if you're nominated for international feature and Best Picture, that's your winner until there's two in the race. And I was so bummed last year because we were like that close. And good for France for, they expanded their group from 7 to 15 to make, which is probably what made Emilia Perez being the choice possible. But I don't see that the Academy is going to punish this film. And this is probably the easiest place to award it other than supporting actress.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since France has won this. I mean, I can't even remember the last time France won.
It's interesting because kind of what you were saying earlier, like there are certain categories to hedge your bets and there's certain categories to play it safe. And I do think picking Emilia Perez is the safe choice for all the reasons that you mentioned. And as I mentioned, 13 nominations. It broke the record for the most nominated international film. That support still has to mean something. So I don't know. The thing that gives me so much pause is that I think probably when Oscar nominations came out, there were a lot of people that hadn't caught up with I'm Still Here yet. And so if they've had more time to watch it, that could be sort of enough to overtake Emilia Perez if Emilia Perez has sort of left a sour taste in their mouth. And then the other thing that I find interesting, again, I don't know how much stock we should put into anonymous ballots. We shouldn't put any stock in them. But one thing that I did read was that international feature has the most sort of abstain, people who just didn't vote for it at all. And so I wonder, like, does that benefit the passion of I'm Still Here? Because if you're so passionate about this film and Fernanda Torres that you can make it into Best Picture over the likes of I'm a Real Pain, which we know they feel strongly about, over the likes of Sing Sing, that has to mean something. And so, yes, I'm probably going to stick with Emilia Perez, but I don't know. I'm not confident at all. And
well, I think that again, it's the amount of nominations. I think we would have again seen with a group that has overlap within the Academy a pushback. I'm Still Here was nominated. And the last time France was nominated in this category was 2005. I'm still trying to find the last time they won. So it has been a long road to get France back here when you consider all the countries that have kind of finally had their breakthrough in this category. I'm still scrolling and trying to find it. Oh, there we go. They haven't won this category since 1992 when in Dakshin, I gave you the year, won. So, and oh, look, Russia was in the mix. Yeah.
oh my
Banned
gosh.
from the Oscars. They didn't ban the USSR, which is a little weird. The USSR used to hold the record for longest film to ever win any Oscar, and they barely lost that record to A People versus O.J. Simpson.
I think
the documentary that was like 8 pieces,
I think you've convinced me to stick with Emilia Perez because I do think that that's the safe choice for all the reasons that you mentioned. I'm not confident, and I could see I'm Still Here easily win.
I think the Netflix factor helps Emilia Perez still because, again, at least they've seen. There's a better chance they've seen it. Plus, it's won BAFTA, so I kind of feel like it's almost better to pick. It's better to pick Amelia Perez and be wrong in this case than to pick something else. To pick
Yeah.
I'm Still Here and hope that we're, there's an upset.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say this, like the cynical view is like how many people will really care about the backlash? Like maybe they care about it enough in terms of best actress, but to your point, they're like, well, we shouldn't punish the whole movie because of X person.
Yeah, look
And
at
I think,
Bohemian Rhapsody. They didn't
Mhm.
punish anyone involved in that film.
Yeah.
They won
And
4 Oscars.
I think that's an important lesson to remember is sometimes the Academy just likes what they like and the narrative around it doesn't necessarily come into play at all. Amanda, let's move on to animated feature, which is also, I think, a more interesting category this year. You're shaking your head. I'm guessing you're going with the Wild Robot.
Yeah, I'm going with Wild Robot. I mean, I really appreciate the BAFTA is making this like difficult for all of us because it's like, thank you for picking Wallace and Gromit. I would be semi-shocked if that happened. Not too shocked, but I would be shocked. But I do think that when you look at how many nominations Wild Robot has, that looks like the one to win. So again, yeah, I just don't get. Yeah, it's been kind of all over the place. Flow is on Max, so that's easily accessible, but they don't like sequels. That kind of takes Inside Out 2 out of the race. So I'm just going to go with the Wild Robot. I think like you can't hem and haw over every one of these categories or you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the Wild
That's a good
Robot.
point. This is an interesting year, I think, to see how much sort of these passion picks matter because I feel like in a lot of these categories where there may be a little bit of struggle, it's like, okay, do you go with the stats? And like I think the Wild Robot definitely has the stats in its corner. Chris Sanders, long overdue, much beloved in the animation industry. So like the Wild Robot makes the most sense. But then there's so much passion behind Flow. And sometimes that passion is enough to overtake it. And so like, and I think there's a lot of categories. I mean, we'll sort of get to the demi of it all. The same could be said for like, if there was enough passion for No Other Land to get nominated with no distributor, like, does that mean something?
Sure,
So
and sometimes the
yeah,
nomination is the reward in some of those cases where like
yeah.
you did a great job, so you get a nomination, but we'll see how it plays out. I just can't. There's just enough in the top categories to like nitpick about that. You're like,
Yeah, yeah. I just think, yeah, this is a year, and we can get to this at the end, but I think this is a year that's going to be very telling for the Oscars moving forward. Like, I feel like the people who win, it's going to tell us a lot. Because, for example, and we should mention, if El Mal were to win Best Song, Jacques Audiard would win as part of the songwriting team. And so, like, if they were to win, to me that says like no, they don't care at all. Because if you wanted to punish Audiard for his own comments that were sort of terrible and off, then you could do that and just not vote for that song at all. But that goes back
well,
to
you have to remember in some of those categories, especially the below the line, they don't list the names of the people. They just name the songs. So they might not even be aware that he wrote part of that song. So that's another problem. That's another thing. I mean, it's very easy to punish Carla for her comments because her name's on the ballot. It's very easy to maybe punish him for a director, but you get down into the weeds past directing, the names aren't on the ballots. They're not on the ballots for writing. They're not on the ballots for cinematography. That's why Roger Deakins kept losing. So that can be the factor that makes a difference and maybe makes it a little bit more fair that they just have to go on which one they like. But we saw last year where, they didn't give Oppenheimer sound. They went with something which was the loudest in the category. they went with the zone of interest, which was this very skilled and nuanced sound that was horrifying. I mean, no one watches that movie and doesn't think about the sound and all the gunshots going off. So we know they're not just to a certain extent rubber stamping one film or a film that they like in some of these categories. They are willing to go, no, this film deserves best sound. So I think there is some hope, but we'll see.
Yeah. And that's to sort of like what trends are we going to see from the winners. I think that's like a great point of like how much are they actually watching these things, because we keep hearing, oh, I didn't make it to the second half of the Brutalist. Oh, I didn't watch The Substance because of the gore or whatever. But then every once in a while you do have these wins that are truly inspired wins where you go, no, they're paying attention. Like they're, you know, really recognizing the craft when it needs to be recognized. And I think in multiple categories this year is going to be very telling of that, of like, you know, are you going to recognize The Substance in hair and makeup because of the scope of what they had to do in like 17 in a 17-day shoot or whatever it was. So that's why I think I'm always interested in like the macro of like, what does this year tell us about this game and this industry? And I feel like we have a lot of categories that are going to be really interesting to like of test subjects, shall we say. But I agree. I think The Wild Robot is the safe choice. Speaking of another safe choice, Amanda, we can all agree that the Oscar for Conclave's adapted screenplay win is being engraved, correct?
Yeah, I don't see how. I feel the same way I did about the 2016 with La La Land, Manchester by the Sea, and Moonlight. It feels like those three films had to split the top three kind of auteur awards, where we saw, you know, La La Land win director, Moonlight and Manchester win screenplays. I kind of feel like we're going to see that again, where the love is spread around. And Conclave has not lost the screenplay race. And usually I would not even mention the Golden Globe, but it's won everything. I would also point out that I read the book and I felt bad for John Lithgow, because in the book his part is a lot more bombastic. I was like, oh, they changed his role. Poor guy. He could have been a contender.
He could have been a contender. That's so interesting.
He could have won.
I read a Robert Harris book in college for like an essay, and I was so bored by it that I was like, I'm never gonna read. Maybe I will read Conclave. Who knows?
I was so excited when I found out he was playing that role. I was like, oh, he's gonna get his third Oscar nomination, and it's like, nope, not gonna happen.
Yeah,
that's okay. But yeah, it's Conclave. They've won everything they can. So this is one where you don't overthink it. You have to be nominated for Best Picture to win this category. So I'm sorry for everyone who loves Sing Sing. I'm telling you right now, don't pick that one. Don't overthink this. You should just go with Conclave.
Go with Conclave. Speaking of a category, though, Amanda, that I am overthinking, Best Original Screenplay. I have had Sean Baker winning this all season. Even when the movie was fading into oblivion, I thought he's going to win something for this, and it makes sense to award him screenplay. But now we're in serious trouble because we have The Substance, which is also this auteur-driven indie film that has done very well. Outside of Margaret Qualley, kind of picked up everything that you would have expected it to pick up. So, and I always say, you know, speaking of, you said below the lines, it's always like the most of something. And I feel like original screenplay, they tend to like the most original vision. And so it makes sense. It would kind of, you know, the Get Out, Promising Young Woman, like we just see these films kind of come through. Yeah. So I see that argument for Coralie Farshad, but then we have A Real Pain with Jesse Eisenberg. So spoiler alert, I think we can all agree Kieran Culkin is going to sail his way through. But we've seen a lot of, you know, the BAFTA win.
If A Real Pain was nominated for Best Picture, this would be my big swing hard on my heart over head prediction, and I would predict a Real
Yeah,
Pain based on the BAFTA one.
1,000%.
Here is the problem why you cannot do that. Since they expanded Best Picture, you have to be nominated for Best Picture to win either of the screenplay races. Period. The end. Then, for fun, I went back and looked to see like how often was the winner a Best Picture nominee, and I could only find 2 recent examples where it was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Pedro Almodovar's I can never say his name right. Pedro's Talk to Her, where they were not nominated for Best Picture but picked up original screenplay. So for that reason alone, and A Real Pain was my favorite movie of the year. How's that for a left field choice? You know, I can't pick it. I can't. So I'm going to go with Anora. I think you're right. I think this is where Sean Baker does pick up his award, but the substance is the most original. And you're right. They have really gone that way more often than they haven't. And that is something to remember, that this is not best screenplay, not based on a previously adapted material. It's not a long name. They've really taken that original to heart. But I think you're right. I think this is where Sean Baker wins his award.
Yeah, and this is one of those categories where it's like, okay, I could make a riskier choice, but I just feel like just play it safe and pick Sean Baker, especially because, spoiler alert, I have Anora winning Best Picture, and I just feel like the screenplay picture tie is like
we're gonna have a fight soon.
Yeah, the fight is coming. But okay, so next up though, I think, Amanda, is 2 categories that we don't need to fight about, which is Best Supporting Actor and Best Supporting Actress. Saldana and Culkin locked in, completing their sweep, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kieran Culkin's shtick has not run old yet. People seem to still really like it. Also, I think in his case, like being the child actor of a very famous family of child actors, it's like, see, we didn't screw all of them up. And I'm just talking about the ones in his family. Some of them are well-adjusted adults. I get why people think he's just playing himself. He's obviously not. I really like Jeremy Strong, but he has not gotten, there's no way they're going to touch that film. And I agree. I think if we would have seen a blowback on Zoe Saldana, we would have seen it somewhere at SAG or at BAFTA. But maybe they'll get to Ariana Grande next year.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Best Supporting Actor, I mean, Clarence Macklin not being here is just breaks my heart. I would have thought that maybe Yuri Borisov would have been more of a player, but that just never came through. I just think, and you know, Kieran Culkin, he's doing a play on Broadway. Like, he hasn't even been on the circuit as much as some other people. And that's also something that I think is very interesting. It kind of proves that, like, you don't have to play the game all the way. You know what I mean? But
he's
I do
made enough appearances, I think,
right,
that, like,
yeah.
And you have to remember, he just came off his Emmy winning appearance through all these award shows. So it's like, at a certain point, it's like, sometimes it's better not to show up. And he's probably at that point where it's like, you know, if I don't go to BAFTA, or if I miss one, but I come back and remind everyone why you love me. I mean, I thought his SAG award speech was hilarious. Let's give it some more heft. Like, but I do worry about someone like Edward Norton, and on his 4th nomination, not even really being in the mix. Like, what is he going to do to finally win one? I'm starting to fear like we're going to get like the Kate Winslet Reader kind of performance. Where it's like, fine, just take it. I don't ever want to see that movie again. Like, clearly we should have got to you earlier than this, but yeah.
I think we have another actor that we're going to talk about soon that's going to, you know, coming into that problem. But I want to talk about actors first, because this is, so I think for me, documentary, original screenplay, and actress are the 3 that I'm sort of struggling with the most. And actress is another one where it's like head over heart. I'll let you go. Tell me your thought process about this category.
I'm going with Demi Moore. Mikey Madison had the chance to shut this down with winning SAG, and she couldn't do it. Now, I will say, devil's advocate, Demi Moore has a lot of friends in the acting branch. It's not, that was always going to be a heck of a lot easier for her to win than it was at BAFTA. It's possible being a popcorn actress, as she said, might have hurt her there. But I think that the fact that the substance is in a Best Picture nominee, she's really been out there campaigning. I think it might be her turn. It seems like this is lined up really well for her. She kind of surprised everyone when she won that Golden Globe, and then she got up there and delivered the best acceptance speech she could possibly give. And she's only gotten better. So I do think that she's been out there campaigning. I mean, she got all of the Charlie's Angels back together to campaign for her to win this. So I do think that I think she's going to take this. I wonder if BAFTA was after the SAG Awards like it used to be, if they would have voted for more, because sometimes even then they would be like, well, so-and-so is going to win and we want to be on the winning team. So there is a chance that if that had been the opposite flipped like they used to be, that Moore might have taken it. And we don't know by how many votes Mikey Madison won.
Yeah.
I also think this year we might see, I think if you just look at what the stories are about, an Asian actress who's now invisible might seem more relevant than giving this to somebody who's playing a sex worker. Not to just boil it down to that again, but we just did that last year. It's one of the most awarded ways, the best ways to win an Oscar for Best Actress. I also think they might want to make Mikey Madison wait one more time. Sometimes it's better not to win on your first at bat.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like a Jennifer Lawrence, right? I mean, I
prove to us this isn't a fluke.
Yeah, a fluke. Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great point. I think if Demi had won SAG during Oscar voting, because I thought her SAG speech was fabulous as well, very humble. I think then I would have been like, she's got this on lock. But there's a few things that give me pause. Yes, Honora is a very soft front runner. But I just think that, we've seen in these years where there is a little bit of a split, Best Actress tends to go to the person who's in a stronger film. And I guess you could argue that Honora is a stronger overall package than the substance.
Not to give away my Best Picture winner, I don't have Honora winning Best Picture. I think Honora peaked about 2 weeks too early. And I think that, again, it's possible that the British being a little snobbish. Remember, Mikey Madison was also nominated for Breakthrough Performer. Yes, one's voted on by the public, one's voted on by members of the Academy. I still see how Demi Moore could do this. Frankly, I don't see how Honora wins Best Picture and he doesn't win. And since I don't have Honora winning, I have to go. I'm going to go with Demi Moore.
I wonder if if Demi's sort of career arc works against her. Because yes, they do like a comeback, but is there a certain, you mentioned sort of the Brits being like, is there a certain population that may not want to vote for her because they're like, you're not a serious actress? I'm not saying that that's how I feel. That's a terrible way. I wonder if
because we've seen people, we've seen this overall where they really do love these. Sandra Bullock wasn't like in 5 Best Picture nominees before she won. So we have seen this kind of like, you come back, you make a strong statement. And this film, before the gore, makes a huge statement about women in Hollywood and women in general, how they're treated after a certain age. And we have seen, with the exception of last year, Best Actress starting to skew a little older, which could help more. They're not just going for the ingenue. And remember, Jennifer Lawrence had been nominated before. Even Emma Stone, before she had won, was nominated before. Brie Larson was in the conversation before she won. This is somebody who most people didn't know a year ago.
Yeah, I think and we'll get to this, I think Honora is a strong contender, and I think Mikey is Honora. And so...
No, I agree with you on that, but again, because I'm not going to tell you the rest of my predictions right now, I think it's either all or done. It's either Honora wins and Mikey Madison wins, or we're going to see a split amongst the top 3 or 4 awards. And if we're going to see a split, which is where I'm going, I don't see Honora winning and Mikey Madison losing. I think they're a combination.
Yeah. So let's go through the rest of our categories, and then maybe we come back to actress once we're sort of clearer on where we stand for the rest of them. So now we go to best. Yeah. Now we go, which is good. That's why I needed somebody to fight with me, to be like, no, you're wrong.
You have a girl fight.
I want Demi. So that thing is kind of head over heart. Like, my heart wants to vote for Demi and pick Demi. Not that I get a vote for anything, to pick Demi, but I'm very worried for her. And okay, so Amanda, who do you have for best actor? As my guest, I would like you to do.
Sorry, my dogs are not used to not getting enough attention. So you hear a woof, it's them.
You're fine. We love having pet cameos on Chasing the Gold. Who is your pick?
He loves to watch movies.
Well, that's my kind of dog, and fluffy and white.
Watch movies. My Instagram is him charging my TV, watching TV and movies.
As he should.
He loved Gladiator 2. That was his favorite movie so far.
He would have voted for Denzel.
I still think he should have got in. I'm like, only a movie star can give that kind of performance where you are just chewing the scenery. But to get back to it, I'm going with Adrian Brody. First of all, Mikey Madison could never have gotten up there and given the same speech Timothée Chalamet gave, because the internet would still be tearing her a new one.
Thank you. I want to get to that, but go ahead with the rest of your point.
The Michael Phelps of acting. Yeah, okay. Good luck with that one. Now, that being said, lost my train of thought. Just to give a little background, right now, Adrian Brody holds the record for youngest Best Actor winner. He has to win this, or there has to be a surprise other than Timmy. Because if he loses to Timmy, he loses not only his second Oscar, he loses his record, which is not the night he wants. He wants to hold on to that. Now, if you look at, I went back and I remember I started, last year I watched The Zone of Interest, and then I read, just to give you some context of how I got into this, I read that article that Steven Spielberg wrote about The Zone of Interest, and I'm like, well, I haven't seen Schindler's List in a while, so I watched that, and then Amazon really thought I had this interest in Holocaust films, which led me to rewatching The Pianist, and I forgot how big that performance was, frankly. So then I went back and watched Richard Dreyfuss's The Goodbye Girl. I think I got the title right. Anyways, who was the original record holder for youngest actor to win Best Actor. And the thing that I noticed about those films was just how remarkable and how unquestionable their wins were, and how they aged really well, regardless of how you feel about Richard Dreyfuss. He really gave this kind of big, huge performance in that film. I don't think Timmy really does that in A Complete Unknown. It's a little too quiet. I think he's fallen into the celebrity trap, where I think, like Leo, it might be better if he has to wait a little bit more. I mean, Leo only got not. I don't even think Leo got nominated in his 20s. He got nominated in 19. And I think he was 30 the next time he was nominated for The Aviator. He was in his 30s. So again, when you see The Brutalist and you see Adrian Brody, he's in almost every scene of this film. Even if you get only through the first half of this film, he's giving you the most acting. This is the biggest performance in the category, maybe in all of the acting categories this year, where it's kind of undeniable that he would pull this off again. And I think that, the fact that he won BAFTA has the overlap. And it's possible that we know that at SAG, there were some problems with the screeners. He was the only nomination for the film. So I think that's probably what happened more than anything, is that A Complete Unknown had 4 nominations and The Brutalist only had 1, which is not the case this time. But I think it's Adrian Brody.
Yeah, I feel confident in sticking with Brody despite the SAG thing. I think to me definitely does kind of suffer. I mean, for me, and again, I don't think quality matters. Like, I haven't really talked about what my favorites are. But when I was watching A Complete Unknown, personally, I struggled with seeing the Bob Dylan of it all. I kept seeing Timmy giving a performance. I just couldn't move past it. I do think he needs like a revenant. He needs something that he can fully disappear into. I don't think this was it. And to get to the SAG speech, I mean,
they have a history with studs. I mean, he doesn't do it for me, but I get it does it for other people. They have a history of making them wait. I mean, Bradley Cooper's never won. Leo had to wait till he was 40. Al Pacino had to wait till he was in his 70s. Like they have this long history of making them wait. And if he's fallen into that, where he's got a Kardashian girlfriend, isn't she? I don't know. But anyways, it's at that point where it's like they might want one more out of him.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. And I think we should mention, and this could tie into the Demi Moore of it all, that SAG, since the merger with AFTRA, is not as predictive as it used to be, because now you have all these other people voting that are not the actors. You have, your television newscasters, your radio, whatever. So like
not for the film categories, not for, you have to be, they are a little bit more selective in the film categories, not ensemble. They won't just there's still some overlap, and you have to remember that the acting has really blurred. There's not really just film stars or TV stars. Most of them, have blurred the lines a little bit more than they used to be.
Yeah, still though, it's not as predictive as it used to be. So I still think Adrian Brody, I think, the Oscars love a comeback kid. And I think a lot of times, like, maybe Adrian Brody is somebody that they just like. Like, I bring this up because when Coleman was getting nominated again and again for Sing Sing, I was like, oh, they must really like Sing Sing, so it's going to get into picture. And then I realized, no, they just like Coleman, And so I think they just like Adrian Brody. And even if they've moved away from other aspects of the film, I think it's enough for him to sort of have a comeback win.
Well, I mean, look at A Complete Unknown. We've yet to predict it to win in any category, or even have it as like our second choice in any category. Whereas we know The Brutalist is probably going to win a couple of awards.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that going further. So we know that maybe they haven't seen it, haven't completely sat through it at one point, but they've had time now to sit through it. So I think that could benefit the film. I think that could benefit Brody, is that they have to, they almost kind of have to see A Complete Unknown, because it's nominated for, it's not even James Mangold. I mean, A Complete Unknown is not even James Mangold's best musical or docudrama film, for that matter.
Thank you for saying that. I am ride or die for Walk the Line. I don't care. I will defend that movie until the end of time. I think it's great. And I just, all the Johnny Cash scenes in A Complete Unknown, I was like, we already did this. And it was better the first time. We don't need to do it again. But I do
mean,
want to
even
talk
the
about,
scenes in A Walk the Line where they had Jerry Lee Lewis talking about going to hell were a lot better than some of these cutaways to other musicians and A
Mhm.
Complete Unknown. I mean, I didn't care about hardly any of these characters.
And I think Monica Barbaro steals all of the scenes she's in away from Timmy. Like, I don't think necessarily this was a great showcase for him as an actor, to your earlier point.
Or Edward
Because he's
Norton,
not,
for that matter.
no. The Edward Norton thing is, to me, was like, here's a veteran actor that they like. All of this is, again, quality doesn't necessarily matter when it comes to the Oscars, but A Complete Unknown's trajectory has really shocked me because
Yeah, it's another film that's been over nominated. It's
Mhm.
done too well, and it's
Yeah,
given it the sense of like it's going to do really well at the Oscars. But this might be the one that had the most nominations and doesn't walk away with anything
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's either Timmy or nothing. Like that's where we're
Yeah.
at.
I do think sound, like I said, it's still somewhat of a possibility, but yeah, I think this is gonna blank on Sunday. But I do want to talk about the SAG speech, Amanda, because as you mentioned, like if somebody else had given that speech, they would be dragged. And listen, anyone who's like listened to this podcast for any amount of time knows this. I'm a very like earnest, wear my emotions on my sleeve type of a person. So I can appreciate that aspect of it, and I can give him like the benefit of the doubt of like maybe he was nervous or maybe he realized like this is the only time I'm going to be able to talk about this movie, so let me say what I want to say. But like what?
We didn't talk about the movie. I mean, Mikey Madison, they're both around the same age, I suspect, but she couldn't get up there and say that. She'd still be being roasted
Yeah.
online. Like,
Yeah.
seriously. Like, I want to be Michael Jordan or Michael Phelps. I want to be one of the great. You can't get up there and say that.
Yeah.
I mean, Leo's never ever done anything like that. I mean, Meryl Streep is the greatest of her generation, and she's never done that. Like,
Yeah.
mm,
And I
yeah, I
wonder
mean,
though, like speaking of things that may have broader repercussions beyond the season, like is that something that's going to rub people the wrong way, or are people going to be like, "Oh, like look at him being so earnest," and I'm quotation
I don't
marks.
think he was
But
earnest. I don't think he was
I
earnest at all. I think he
to your point, because he is a attractive young white man, I think people want to see that in him and want to give him a more beneficial read that they would not give somebody else.
frankly, I think Jarrell Jerome gave a better performance than he did this year in the wrestling movie he made, and he deserves to be have a bigger career than he currently does. Frankly,
Yeah. No, I mean, again, if we want to talk about who should have been nominated, I think to be honest with you, the only person of the nominees that I probably would have on my personal ballot would be like Fernanda, Demi, and Coleman, and like everyone else, I don't feel particularly strongly about. But yeah, I just that was such a wild speech to me, and a wild way to like position himself because a lot of the conversation around Timmy has been like he's very privileged, and like to me it's like he's leaning into that rather than moving away from it. I don't know, I just I was really baffled by it. It's kind of one of the crazier twists, well not the craziest twist, but like I was like what, it's a really head scratcher of a moment for me.
yeah, I think this is one of those standalone SAG wins where it's not going to translate to anything. Um, and again, like not many people would do that for a reason. Now, I have no problem with saying this was a really hard role. I had to learn to play guitar. I had to do this. Yeah, fine. That's fine. But I do think like getting up there and saying, you want to be the greatest actor of all, you want to be the Michael Phelps of acting. Okay, Michael Phelps ran a race. You're trying to win a subjective award. Like everything you do is going to count towards that. All Michael Phelps
Mm-hmm.
had to do was be first at the end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference here, people. Big, huge difference. I mean, arguably, look at Meryl Streep. She has yet to win her fourth Oscar. She doesn't
Yeah.
even have 3 lead actress Oscars.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I'm glad that we could have this conversation because, to your point, if it was a woman, if it was a person of color, the
Could not
reactions
do
would
it.
be could not do it. And I think it's important to point that out because there's double standards upon double standards upon double standards.
And the fact that we only saw a cutaway to like Edward Norton when he was thanked probably tells us what was going on in that room.
Well, speaking of Adrian Brody, he was not happy to lose that award.
He looked surprised, but that's okay. I mean, that's fine. He didn't do anything inappropriate, so
he probably thought that he was. I mean, it's okay to be surprised, but every time there was like a reaction shot of his face in particular, I don't know, just made me laugh. But
well, they only had one reaction of his face, so it's. But then also Culkin's like, you only get 45 seconds, Brody. Like, like everyone in the room thought he was going to win. So I think as long as he wins the Oscar, I will be okay because I can't listen to another Timmy speech because he just sounds like everything in my life has gone too easily. Like, really?
Yeah.
How
and
hard
now
has this been?
You have to fight for this one thing, this Oscar. So Amanda, let's get to Best Director because I have a feeling we're going to disagree. So I'll let you go first.
Brady Corbett, The Brutalist. It was the hardest, the most to do. And that BAFTA win, Sean Baker had the chance to close it out and couldn't. And we've seen, it's so weird. We've seen 4 different winners, or excuse me, 3 different winners. Shout out to John MQ for giving the best acceptance speech. Like, if you are not nominated for an Oscar, that's the way to do it. I'm going to win an Oscar. No, you're not, but still very sweet. I don't know. I think once you expand beyond just the directing branch, that's what's going to help someone like Brady Corbett. Because it is the most of everything in the category.
So what do you make of DGA? Because it is the most. So then why wouldn't the Directors Guild want to recognize that? Why wouldn't they want to recognize this, filmmaker who, he's had a couple good projects, but this is sort of his arrival, this sort of masterpiece, magnum opus. He's still relatively young. Like it just seems like it would have a Directors Guild win all over it.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened, but I still think that, like, when there's a split and BAFTA goes one way, sometimes it's best to go with the BAFTA winner. I also think the fact that the Academy will be voting as a whole will help someone like Brady Corbett because, again, it's the most. And it feels like the momentum stalled for Anora at the BAFTAs. It's like they've never been able to keep it going for a long period of time. They just have these like spurts where it seems like we love it. Nope, we don't love it.
I think, I definitely see the argument for Corbett. I don't think it's like a crazy choice by any means. I just think that The Brutalist has also faded significantly. I mean, I thought earlier in the season, I was like, picture, director, screenplay, potentially, production design. Like, I just felt like it was going to be a sweeper, and that really hasn't come through. And yes, I believe SAG was a fluke, but like even Adrian Brody has not been able to sail through. So like, I don't think that there's that universal love for that film that we thought was going to be there. And Sean Baker, he is sort of this beloved indie filmmaker that's finally had this big Oscar breakthrough. And I think he could potentially
I don't feel like that story's taken off though. I mean, that might have helped him out with his peers, but I don't know if that's going to help him out at the Oscars because he's never been nominated before. So this is a weird race because there's not anyone in here who's got like the overdue factor. This is a tough one.
You sort of have, because you also have, you have 3 directors that sort of have the same narrative, because Coralie Farge is also sort of the not overdue, but the auteur arriving on the scene with a big passion project.
Yes,
so sort of
she will be. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm getting her confused with Amelia Perez. Never mind. I apologize.
Yeah. And then you have the big snub for Volker, Bertelmann for Conclave. And then you have like the overdue person is James Mangold finally getting a director nomination for A Complete Unknown, but that was never going to be, that was we're recognizing your career. Here's a director nomination to add to your resume. But I don't know. I mean, and DGA has aligned with the Oscars 9 out of 10. It's interesting that the one year that they didn't align was the Bong Joon-ho year, and sort of Bong
And
Joon-ho.
how did that happen? It happened because the Academy votes as a whole, and Parasite won SAG Ensemble. So the fact that the Brutalists took, they went with it at the BAFTAs makes me feel like, I mean, I don't think Anora has the below the line support. It's not going to win anything below the line, where the Brutalists could benefit from having people who are going to vote for it for score, or we know that it was beloved by it's going to win cinematography. It's got more eyes on it. It's got more support potentially within the industry that I think will help Brady Corbett pull this out. But I think I would love to see the vote total, because somebody tells me this is going to be a close one.
A nail biter, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't see Anora as a film winning picture, director, screenplay, and actress. I just feel like that is too many big awards for that film.
The thing about Anora, though, is that yes, I just don't know, like, in terms of below the line, what nominations it could have picked up. Because to me, like, it getting editing, screenplay, director, actress, and a supporting actor, like, it kind of got everything that it needed. Like, as I mentioned earlier, like, if Margaret Qualley had gotten into supporting actress, I would have felt much more confident about Demi. And the fact that Yuri Borisov was kind of a lock all season long, which is crazy, because when I saw that movie, I was like, he's phenomenal. I would love to see him nominated somewhere. I never would have imagined that he would have been one of the guys that just was around all season long. So I feel like Anora really got everything that it needed to get to be a major contender. And Sean Baker, I mean, the Florida Project, like Tangerine, like, he's been around. Whereas I think maybe for the Brutalist, speaking of making people wait, like, maybe they're going to be like, okay, Brady, like, are you, I don't know if Vox Lux is enough of a thing, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, I understand that. I just feel like with Anora, I don't know. I don't think it's got the support that it appeared to have a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It couldn't maintain it. And that's what really, to me, kind of makes me feel like, are they ready to award him?
Yeah. But, like, does the Brutalist have that support, though? Because
I think the Brutalist had a comeback, and we know that the BAFTA Awards has more overlap, whereas, we don't see that. We have seen that when there are splits, it's usually the winner of the BAFTA when they do break.
Yeah. But could the BAFTA win had just been like the Brutalist has more of a British sensibility than an Anora? Like, Anora is more American, whereas the Brutalist has more of a European sensibility.
No, I don't think that's it, because they're both very American stories. They're about being in America and immigrants in America, and I don't think that would necessarily be a factor for either. So I do. Again, I just feel like we're going to see a split this year in picture director, and I think Brady Corbett's going to take it. I think they're going to want to award all three films something. They're going to give Conclave adapted. They take care of Sean Baker, an original, and then they give Brady Corbett director, and they've taken care of all three. And then we move on to Best Picture.
But do they care about taking care of all three? I mean, I
don't think they think of it that way, but I think that that's what will end up happening, is that, they love all three films, clearly, but I don't, we've seen historically the Palme d'Or winner has not always, we went 50 years between a Palme d'Or winner becoming a Best Picture winner.
Yeah.
with Marty and Parasite, I don't think we're due for that to happen so soon again.
Yeah, this is the trickiest aspect of this season, is that because we don't have a strong best picture frontrunner, we don't have an Oppenheimer and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, if we did, a lot of these categories would be easier to predict, because we're like, okay, they're picking up their acting, like all these wins to go with picture. But because like all our best picture frontrunners are softer frontrunners, it's like hard to be like, what else are they going to pick up? Because we know they have to pick up like more things, you know. So Amanda, you're going with Conclave in picture, correct?
Yep.
Tell me why.
Okay, here's why. It's not a preferential ballot, meaning it's not a popular vote. So you cannot win Best Picture with basically, if there was 100 votes, you get 11, and then pick your least favorite film gets 9. I'm not going to pick one because I don't want to get hate comments. So what happens is you have to get to 50% of the votes to win Best Picture. It is entirely possible that after they divvy up all the first place ballots, that Anora will be in first place, but not have the votes, not have 50% total. So what happens then? They take the film that's in 10th place and they redistribute all of their second place ballots to those other films. And if they don't get to 50% after that, they keep doing this. And that's where it's going to make the difference for Conclave, is it's a far less polarizing film, where you could see people with the Nora or the Brutalist putting it in first, or you could see people putting it in the 8th or 9th place because they don't like it. And you have to remember, Conclave has the SAG Ensemble win. And I think the same thing with La La Land Moonlight. Something tells me if we saw the first round of voting, La La Land probably was in first place, but it didn't have enough support to get to 50%. And slowly but surely, as all of those votes were calculated and distributed, Moonlight would overtake it. And I think that's what's going to end up tripping up Anora, is it's not going to get the second and third place votes that it needs in order to win Best Picture.
Yeah, I see your argument, but I think Anora is the kind of film, because this is not a year. I think if we looked at like the vote totals for a Parasite, for an Oppenheimer, for Everything Everywhere All at Once, those are films that on the first ballot would be get whatever threshold they need.
They might need one or two more rounds, but they're not going to need a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
But this year is a year where it is going to come down to like the math of the preferential ballot. Which is why I think Anora winning at PGA is very telling here, because that's the only other precursor where they are voting on a preferential ballot. So, like, if Conclave was to do well on a preferential ballot, why didn't they win PGA?
Again, it's one branch of the Academy. I don't really understand how it won. Frankly, I think Conclave is a far more populist film. But I think the problem, again, will be that Anora, in an election year, doesn't feel like a Best Picture winner. We just came off a year where a woman lost president again. Whereas you have Conclave, which is this movie about a secret ballot, it feels like something that would win in an election year. Now, I do think that, again, when the Academy votes as a whole, you have to remember the acting branch of the Academy is the largest branch. So winning SAG Ensemble is a huge deal. Remember, that's what really sealed the deal for Parasite to win Best Picture, because it lost PGA, it lost DGA, hell, it lost at the BAFTAs. But Conclave has won the BAFTA, and they didn't go overboard in awarding the film where we'd all be like, okay, clearly this is just British flag waving. They didn't go bonkers with this. It's got BAFTA and it's got SAG Ensemble, and I think that is enough of a winning combination that it's going to get more of the 2 and 3 votes that it needs in order to win Best Picture and overtake the frontrunner Anora, and overtake what people think is the presumed frontrunner Anora.
Yeah, I just don't think Anora, for me, I don't know. I just feel like the lowest it might be on somebody's ballot is like a 5, or like I don't see it as a film that would be like consistently ranked at the bottom of people's ballots. I don't think
it's not my favorite film.
It's not my favorite, but I think it's like enough of a middling thing where I don't think it's like people are going to hate it enough to put it at a 10. Whereas like something like The Brutalist or The Substance has enough elements to turn people off. I do think there are enough people that are going to put Honora at a number 2 or a 3. There is
I don't think it's that populist choice. I just feel like, again, I can't even think of the last time they went for a Best Picture winner where the film was about a woman who was a sex worker. Like, that's one problem the film's going to have. Two, it's just one problem day where we know there's not a really good track record with that. And I just don't think that the Academy as a whole, I mean, when you look at it, you really think it's going to win 4 Oscars? You really have it winning picture, director, screenplay, and actress? Like, that to me seems like way too many for Honora, which has had this middling season. Whereas I think the BAFTA 3 could repeat for Conclave, where it's picture, director, picture, screenplay, excuse me. We've been talking for a while, and editing.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a solid Best Picture formula for me.
Yeah,
and again, I don't
think,
see Mikey Madison winning, and I don't see ways to pick more and Honora to win Best Picture. I might be wrong. I mean, this is the year to take a risk.
I think if you have like picture, screenplay, and director would be like enough of a. I know those are like the top 3 prizes, and sort of, so that's kind of a crazy combination, but I do think there's enough about Honora that's like it's middling enough to be able to win picture. And I mean,
know people that have a problem with the middle section of that film, that it goes on a little too long. I personally, I wouldn't rank it in my top 5, frankly, because it's not, again, it's not my type of film. I don't like the subject matter. But I do think that I don't think that it's going to get the 2 and 3 votes. I think that's something that is, I mean, look at Spotlight. There were a lot of films that year that were in play, like there was this year, but Spotlight was more of a consensus film, and it had SAG Ensemble. Same thing with Birdman. It had SAG Ensemble. Plus, I just don't see this as like this everything everywhere kind of winner where it's going to take screenplay and directing plus pick up an acting award. That feels like a lot for this film.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I do think more is going to eke through. Like, I don't think, but I do think though that Honora does have something that feels timely about it, because it is sort of about immigrants and sort of the great American dream, and what is that, right? And so I do think there is a related, it does make a statement about like what does it mean to actually live in modern day America and sort of struggle to survive, and like we all want to believe that there's like a Cinderella story waiting for us, but what does that really look like? I think that that's enough of a message that people have latched onto. I do think there's a lot of love for this movie, and I don't know. I think it does make sense as the Best Picture winner. Now, if Corbet were to win director, which I do think is like a very strong possibility, that would mean that Honora would win picture with just potentially like a picture and screenplay, which has happened before. Spotlight. So I feel like, no film is getting that everything everywhere all at once. Like any film that wins is going to potentially win, Conclave with just editing and adapted screenplay. If The Brutalist were somehow going to win, that would actually have the most, but I just feel like The Brutalist is sort of out of the top.
We can't discount the Brutalist, because if it is a strong directing chance and it's got, let's say, score, cinematography, it is still a possibility. We don't know.
I mean, numbers wise,
that film.
Yeah, numbers wise, The Brutalist would actually make the most sense, because it is going to be winning I do think, like, when all is said and done, The Brutalist will be winning the most things. I just don't think it's going to win picture. And
I just can't pick Honora without picking Mikey Madison, and I think there's too many holes, and I think there's too many things to potentially trip up Honora.
I mean, you're not wrong, but also, like, to your point about the can win, like, Honora has been in the consciousness for quite a while, and I actually think it benefited from not doing well at the Globes. Like, I feel like if it would have peaked too early, we would have been having a different conversation. But the fact that it's sort of been around but not really winning things.
But it hasn't been able to sustain buzz. It's like it has a good week and then it has an off week and then it had another off week. To me, it's like it just comes in these peaks and valleys. And where did all the Oscar voting take place is my question, because did they all vote around the peak where it won PGA and DGA and WGA, or did they all vote towards the end of that where people seemed to be like for it at BAFTA? Like they've not been able to sustain momentum.
No, I mean,
very rare to win Best Picture and not pick up any Golden Globes. I mean, that's a rarity. I mean,
and to only win picture at Critics' Choice, is also like, that's what I mean. I mean, every sort of
stat is going to break.
No, every contender has like major weaknesses. I guess I feel like Anora just feels like the safest option, which is why I'm going with it. And I think because the SAG, like, they had bigger names, they have the John Lithgow, the Ralph Fiennes, Isabella Rossellini, it would have been an easier choice.
They don't care about that as much as you would think. But I think that if anything helped, it was all about the acting. But to go 0 for 4 or 0 for 3, it's not a good look.
It's not a good look, but I mean, like, Demi was always going to win SAG, so that was never really a contentious race. I mean, I guess it could have won ensemble.
It could have won ensemble.
Yeah.
I do think that it's unfortunate, but I just feel like sometimes when a film wins ensemble at SAG, it gives me permission to do something that usually I wouldn't do. And that was like a few years ago, I was picking Parasite. 1917 on paper looked like the Best Picture winner.
Mm-hmm.
I went with Parasite based on SAG ensemble alone. It's got winning SAG ensemble gives you like an 8 out of 15 chance. And when you look at the years that didn't line up with Best Picture, it's like Hidden Figures, Black Panther. The Best Picture winner wasn't going to win.
Yeah.
SAG ensemble. So, and I feel like this is one where you can't excuse that it didn't win SAG ensemble when it's had so much guild support up to that point.
Yeah, I think the PGA win and the preferential ballot there, that just makes sense to me. That I actually do think Anora is a film that's going to do well on a preferential ballot. I just feel like there's a lot of love. Indie Spirits, there's no crossover, but it did very well there. There's every time you see any sort of award show, like, I do think there's love. I mean, when Mikey Madison won at BAFTA, like, there's a lot of love for that movie. It, just like Amelia Perez, how maybe it doesn't translate to us normal folks. Like, I think the industry just has certain movies that they like, and I think Anora is one of them.
Well, before the controversy with Amelia Perez, I never believed it would win Best Picture, mostly because I think it would fall into a category where people respect it, but they don't really necessarily like or love it. So it might fall into that where it's like, yes, I respect that film. That's how I feel about it. Personally, I appreciate that they tried to do something original. Did it work 100% for me? Absolutely not. But I appreciate what it was trying to do. Now, does that mean I would rank it in my top 3 or 4 if I were to do a preferential ballot? Absolutely not. Would it be in my bottom 5? Probably, if I were to sit down and think about it. But I think that, again, a film like Conclave feels like one of those films that can sneak off with this. And it had a really good 2 weeks. Where I think that you can't deny the fact that if it's winning editing, if it's winning screenplay, it won SAG ensemble, it won the right BAFTAs, the momentum shifts and changes. I kind of have to go with it because it didn't win enough BAFTAs to make me go again. Okay, clearly you guys just love anything British. Like, we've seen that before where it's like, okay, clearly you'll just vote for it because it's British. So I respect Honora. I think it's so weird. I hate these years because I'm like, when I'm wrong, I'll figure it out and I'll be like, oh, that's why. Yeah. My brain is like, feels like it's like calculating the stats and the odds, and it's like, I gotta go with Conclave. It might not be my personal choice, but I
I
have
mean,
to go with Conclave.
I see your argument. I just think Honora, like I just feel like there's more love for it than what we are allowing ourselves to see, and I just think it is representative of the times in its own way. I do think there's a
No,
lot of love
I understand that too. Yeah,
love and respect
but
for Sean Baker.
I think director aside, because I think they will take care of Sean Baker and screenplay. I can't pick Honora to win Best Picture because I don't think Mikey Madison will win. And I feel like that is one of those quintessential films where it doesn't make sense almost to award the film without awarding her. So I can't do it. I mean, that's the one aspect of it that I can't get past, is I do believe Demi Moore is going to squeak this out, which leaves the door open to me for Honora to have Honora to be upset. I might be wrong.
Dream scenario is like if Conclave wins editing, and then like A Real Pain wins original screenplay, and then I don't even know, Fernanda Torres wins actress. So by the time we get to picture, we're like, what?
Fernanda Torres is not going to win Best Actress. Don't
It's not
put that
gonna
out
happen.
there.
It's not gonna happen. But I would love to see like as much chaos as possible leading up to the picture. It's kind of like Critics' Choice, where we're like, what the heck is happening? And then Honora won that one picture there, nothing else. But yeah, Amanda, do you have like any sort of crazy? I guess if you're hedging your bet on one category to take a risk on, what would it be?
I'm going with Best Director. I mean, I know it's a risk to pick Brady Corbett, but and I will follow the stats and follow the stats and follow the stats. But when there's usually a split, sometimes it's best to go with the BAFTA winner, unless the BAFTA winner is also the DGA winner. I just feel it's part of you feels bad for Sam Mendes. It's like, you've won everything all year.
Yeah. No, and you know what's funny is I like genuinely did love 1917. Like I loved Parasite more, I guess, but I would not have had a problem with if they would have split up that love a little bit more, because I really did like 1917 a lot. And I think
but just look of shock on Bong Joon-ho's face is like, how bad is my English? Like, they said my name, right? Like, you usually don't see a jaw-dropping upset, and that was a big one where it's like, well, it's winning Best Picture. Like, that happened, and all doubt was erased. So
I think mine is sticking with Demi in actress, because I am predicting Honora in picture, and it would make sense for me to say Mikey and Honora are going to be paired. But my heart wants to go with Demi, so I'm just going to stick with Demi until the end. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It is.
Yeah, I feel like there's enough reasons to pick Demi. So, but this has been a crazy season.
This has been a very, very, very crazy season. Do you have any closing thoughts, Amanda, as we sort of wrap this thing up? Anything that we didn't talk, or just areas you want to dig in deeper? I'll give you the final word here.
No, I mean, it's the 97th. You're going to play around, do it this year. You got to get it right for the 100th. Don't take any crazy risks. You don't do anything stupid like put Best Actress last or anything. I think they've learned their lesson on that one. But it's always going to be interesting. Conan O'Brien, we'll see what we get. He sometimes can run hot or cold, but he did a pretty decent job the year he hosted the Emmy. So I have hope for him. And it'll be nice to see him back on network television.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good show. I'm interested to see, because I feel like post Amelia Perez drama, they probably have to scramble a lot of their plans for the show. So it'll be interesting to see what the performances are like. I think the acting clips
they're not having performances. They're not having
they're not having performances from the nominated songs, but like Ariana and Cynthia are going to be performing. So there's still going to be performances, but they're not doing the songs. And we all know why. But yeah, it'll be good to have the acting clips back. And
Yeah, I prefer the clips. I think it's better for the films. Also, I get why the
Yeah.
actors kind of like that, but I think clips kind of like make people want to go see the movies, which is the point.
yeah, exactly. If the whole point is the celebration of cinema, then let's celebrate the cinema by showing the clips. I guess what category, Amanda, are you going to be the most like curious about?
I'm always a little curious to see what Kieran Culkin's going to say.
Mm.
And I mean, everyone's seen Succession or at least knows of the show, so it has been kind of weird that he hasn't said anything to Jeremy Strong, jokingly. So I'm kind of hoping we get one good poke. Who's the big brother now? Something, Who's
Yeah.
the?
I think editing is going to be really interesting because, like I said, if Sean Baker were to win, I think that would be like very telling, perhaps, of where the night might go. So that might be like our first early indicator.
Well, Nomadland didn't win editing, so it's
Yeah.
very possible that they don't always in editing appreciate the auteur who, writes, directs, produces, and edits their own films. That's a rare combo. I don't think he's going to go for the full sweep of 4. I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, it would be wild if Sean Baker were to be the director that tied the Walt Disney record. Like, that would just break my brain beyond repair.
He better learn how to be entertaining, because otherwise I'm going to be real bored and real, like, praying for an upset in any category.
Well, Amanda, where can our listeners and viewers find you and find your astute takes on all things Oscar season and beyond?
You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amanda Spears, and I always post any articles I write there. And if you want to see my dog Gus chase the TV, he is on Twitter. He's on Instagram at Miss Amanda Spears too. He really didn't like Anatomy of the Fall last year because of the dog. He was very mad at that kid for poisoning the dog.
Did he like
Thankfully,
Flo?
there were subtitles.
I know a lot of cats have been loving Flo. Has he had a chance to see Flo?
I don't let him watch things with dogs if I know, like, it's all dogs. But, depending, it just depends. He loves animal movies, but he was not a big fan of that poor dog getting poisoned last year. He said, no, that's not nice.
Fair enough.
He liked the Banshees of Inisherin too. He was not happy about the donkey dying. Yeah.
Fair enough. Very empathetic dog, empathetic pup. We love to see it.
I know.
I am at Shadan Larkey everywhere. Remember to follow In Session Film, rate and review the podcast, leave a comment. I respond to every single comment because I'm a dork, so I like to hear what the feedback is. And yeah, I guess I'll check back in post Oscars. But Amanda, thank you so much. Like I said, I've just been following you for so long. I'm glad to hear that. I had a lot of fun, and you've given me a lot to think about. So we'll see. We'll see if I make any last minute switches. Maybe I'll join the Corbet bandwagon, and then either thank you for it or who knows?
I can still see how Inora wins Best Picture and loses Director. I just don't see it losing Best Actress and winning Best Picture. It's kind of weird.
That's entirely possible. Yeah, entirely. I mean, there's so many. That's the kind of fun thing about it, is there's so many different combinations, and I feel like as much as I like to be right, I like to have fun, and I like to, play the game, and so this has been such a fun season for that. So we'll see. But Amanda, thank you so much, and have a good night, and thank you everyone for listening to Chasing Gold. We'll see you on Monday, I guess, for a post Oscars debrief. But that's all for now. Have a good one, everybody.